All right, guys, I want to thank you guys for coming. Today, obviously first let me introduce myself. My name is Josh Jorgensen. I'm the producer of BlacktipH. I've been shark fishing since 2003. I've been fishing since I was 3 years old, and I've fished throughout the Great Lakes, Bahamas, all through Florida. I fished in Massachusetts, New Jersey here, so been able to move around a little bit. I'm very thankful, and glad you guys are here. I hope you guys have been able to watch some of our videos and have learned from them. Today, the topics I'm going to go over land-based shark fishing, offshore shark fishing, and how to use heavy drag. You see in our videos, we use up to 120 pounds of drag. So I'm going to teach you guys how to do that today so you guys can catch enormous fish. So first thing I'm going to start off with is basic shark fishing techniques to improve your chances of catching sharks. And the first thing we're going to talk about is your bait. You know, making sure you have the right bait and the right size is very important. So first thing you want to do is whenever you travel somewhere, or if you're in the local area, you want to make sure that you know what is actually legal to use for bait. Some places, and for example in Florida, we can use certain species that you can't use for bait in other states like Texas. So definitely want to make sure you don't run into any legal problems with that. The next thing I want to talk about is my favorite kind of bait to use. So I like bonitas, or you guys call them false albacore. In Florida, everyone calls them bonita. Tunas, stingrays, jacks, and anything in the mackerel family. Oily, bloody fish is really good bait. Try to avoid using like snappers and groupers and stuff like that. But at the same time, I will say this, my biggest fish I ever caught, a 13-foot 4-inch tiger shark, was caught on a yellowtail snapper this big. We had 20-pound bonitas, and this shark would not touch him because it is what he was feeding on. He was eating the snappers off the reef, and that's what he wanted. So sometimes you need to make exceptions based on what the fish are actually feeding on. You know, if you brought bluefin tuna down from here and brought it to Florida, you probably wouldn't catch anything because there's no bluefin tuna in Florida, and it doesn't really relate to the sharks down there. Same thing if you brought fish from Florida and brought it up here. So you want to match everything according to your environment. So let's talk about your bait size. So when I'm surf fishing and I'm casting baits, I don't like to use a bait any bigger than a closed fist. One reason is you could break your rod if you're using too heavy of a bait. And the other reason is you could lose a lot of fish because they can't physically put the bait in their mouth. So when the bite's not good, I will use a bait the size of my fist, just, you know, so like, because there's little fish out there, crabs and little fish that peck at the bait. So you want to make sure your bait lasts long enough so you can soak long enough to actually hook a fish. If the bite's really good, you don't want to use anything bigger than a credit card. That's the size of a bait you want to use. You're going to your hookup ratios will increase by like 50%. That's my favorite size bait when I fish for blacktips and other sharks from the beach. When you're on the boat and you're fishing big sharks, or if you're land-based shark fishing and you're kayaking out 130s and 80 wides, you can use pretty much whatever size you want. Obviously, if you're catching 1,000-pound makos, you could feed it a 100-pound yellowfin, no problem, right? But you also want to make sure that you don't use a bait too big that the shark physically can't eat it, or he may only eat part of it. Sharks can get pretty picky, so I mean, most people don't think that, but I've had times where it gets incredibly frustrating that they won't eat. So, you know, if you can, I'll give you an example story. I was on a trip 2 months ago, and we had this 12-foot hammerhead come right to the boat, and we had this bonita. I was, you know, trying to just create a chum slick, and this hammerhead, I took another bonita and I filleted the whole side, you know, a nice fillet like this. I threw it in the water. He wanted nothing to do with it. He zeroed in on that bonita, and this thing was so aggressive. You know, his head was this wide. He was sticking his head completely out of the water when I lifted the bonita, so he wouldn't eat it, and he would stick his head 2 feet out of the water trying to eat that bonita. When I threw that bonita on the one that he was after, he ate it in a second. But the other bonita I threw out there, he wouldn't even touch it. So sometimes if they zero in on something, that's all they want. And sometimes you have to sacrifice something to give it to them. When I'm kayaking baits from the shore, I tend not to like to use baits bigger than a piece of 8.5 by 11 paper, just because you could miss a lot of fish. Like if you use huge baits, you know, if you're trying to catch bull sharks or sandbars or whatever, or duskies, you know, they don't really have really big mouths. You know, I mean, they can definitely eat a whole bonita, but they're going to sit there and chew on it for a while. So using a smaller bait will definitely increase your odds. At the same time, you guys have probably seen this video, the giant shark defeats 2 experienced fishermen, which was the biggest fish I've ever hooked in my life and terrified me from hooking a fish that size again. That was a 40-inch cobia I used for bait. That was a huge bait. and that thing ate it like it was a snack. So, and I will tell you this, I'm 99% sure that was a great white. It was not a hammerhead or a tiger, so that was the most insane thing ever. But normally that doesn't, we had a YouTube collaboration. We were working with the guys, some of you may know them, they're called Hushin, and I got a 47-pound cobia head I put out, and we had a hammerhead playing with it for about an hour. He tried eating it, and he couldn't. You know, so, and we had 2 cobias out. He could have gone to the smaller cobia, but he only wanted that big head. And when we after an hour of trying to set the hook on this fish, when he tried eating it, we brought the bait back in. There were teeth marks everywhere but where the hook was in the front of the mouth. So he was trying to get it, he couldn't physically fit it in his mouth. So that's where, you know, you may want to get a really big shark, but you may not catch anything as well. You know, so sometimes it's better to use a smaller bait. So going back to know what kind of bait to use, going back to what I was talking about before, blacktips, for example. I've been fishing for blacktips since 2003, and I thought I knew them pretty well until this year when I got baffled. For example, last year with Dude Perfect, we filmed a show with them, and we caught 19 sharks in 24 hours. This year, I caught 12 sharks the entire year. You know, and the sharks were there. They were swimming around and happy, and they just weren't biting. I was throwing live jacks like this, and they'd come up and they'd hit it like they'd bump it like a porpoise or a dolphin. They'd play with the bait. They wouldn't even actually eat it. They were feeding on something I didn't have. I don't know what they were feeding on. They might have been feeding on thread fins. They might have been feeding on sardines, but they were feeding on a bait that I couldn't get. I tried everything: Spanish mackerel, bluefish, jacks. They would not hit. So you always want to make sure you match, like going back, matching your bait with what they're feeding on. Be very observant of what's going on around you. You know, sharks are always following a food source. So when a blacktip's feeding on a bluefish, that's all you're gonna catch them on is a bluefish. If you try using a jack crevalle or a bonita, they're not gonna touch it. So you always want to match your bait. And one reason I always bring a bait rod with me wherever I go to make sure that I'm, you know, like you could be the most prepared. You could come out there with the best bait. You know, out here you come out with, you know, yellowfin tuna heads, big eye tuna heads, bluefin tuna heads. You have a variety of good bait. You're going out to fish and make out the shark charmer or some of that. And he may not be wanting any of that. He might be feeding on triggerfish. You know, it sounds crazy, but they do that. That's all they want. So always bring extra rods to catch bait. Don't just, you know, lock in for sharks. I don't know how many of you guys use circle hooks. That's all I use. I used to use J hooks a lot. And one thing that happens with J hooks, forget the gut hooking. I mean, that's one big problem. But you actually, like on a mako or a blacktip sharks that jump, you'll lose a lot more fish. They'll just spit it when they get that certain angle. That J hook just comes right out of their mouth. So you want a circle hook. If you get a good hook set in there, it's very hard for it to come out if you keep that line tight. So I highly recommend always using circle hooks. We're going to save questions to the end. I got a whole bunch of stuff to go through here, and I'll get derailed. So catch and release. I'm all about catch and release, and one thing, you know, I always tell people is 50% of actually catching the fish is burning it, landing it. The other 50% is releasing it. You know, we've had times we've caught huge sharks and they died, and it just felt like no one was happy at that moment when we saw this 12, 13-foot fish that was dead. You know, it was just like, wow, that sucks. So even though you caught this enormous fish of a lifetime, the fact that it died means that you lost. You know, the fish didn't live. You didn't have a successful release. So I always tell people this: always avoid using light tackle for shark fishing. It's more fun, it can be, but you're going to kill a lot more fish with light tackle. Sharks, like most fish, they can only fight for so long. You know, I've had battles go 2.5 hours plus, and that, you know, I fought one for almost 3 hours, and that shark died. I was in 500 feet of water, and it was sitting on the bottom, and I couldn't lift it up. So, and that was hooked on a sailfish rod. So I fought it for 3 hours, and it ended up being on the bottom of the ocean. So you definitely want to make sure you use the right tackle for the sharks you're targeting. If you're targeting huge sharks, use 130s. Don't even waste time with anything else. If you're targeting sharks that are around 500 pounds, I wouldn't even use anything less than an 80 wide. You know, you always want to make sure that you are fully prepared, and you use really strong line. I always use line that's 3 times stronger than the drag I'm using, because if you get down to your third spool, that your drag on your reel is much, much higher. And when it comes to removing the hook, a lot, I've seen this, I've done this, we use these expensive hooks, like these are $5 a piece, and sometimes, you use those ownership removers, you're gonna spend, what, $10, $12 a hook, right? So you don't wanna lose your hook. But if you try to take the hook out for too long, like if you spend 5 minutes doing that, the shark's gonna die. I've seen it happen, they can't be on their side for that long, they can't be without movement for so long, they need to have water flush through their gills. So that's why in a lot of my videos you'll see us using bolt cutters. I don't even try to take hooks out anymore on big sharks. I just cut the hook, let it go. And when you cut the hook, you will, by cutting the hook in half, you allow it to slide out eventually. If you can't get it out then, it will eventually come out. And one thing I learned from my diving friends that, in Florida there's a lot of shark dives. Sharks actually get flesh-eating bacteria from hooks. So you'll see some sharks that their entire face rots off. So it's really important to remove the hooks. And I'll tell you this straight up, hooks don't rust out. They don't. It's a big myth. When I caught a Jack Crevalle once, and it had I took a picture of it, I'm gonna post it up. It had a 16-aught mustad circle hook in it. The barnacles on the hook were like this big. When I took it out of the jack, the piece of the hook that was in the flesh had absolutely zero corrosion because the fish's physical body sealed it up so it couldn't corrode. So that piece of steel was in there forever. It never would come out. So always try to remove the hooks. That's why, and if you can't remove the hook, just bring a pair of bolt cutters, cut it, And it's not just sharks, do that with all fish. It's not just sharks get that flesh-eating bacteria, all fish will get that. So super important. Next thing, sharp hooks. Guys, I can't tell you how many sharks I've lost because I was too lazy to sharpen my hooks. So make sure your hooks are as sharp as possible. Especially when you get a really big shark and you have a huge hook like this, you want to make sure that that penetrates all the way through. And a lot of times, you guys, I don't know if you guys do Makos and that, but sometimes you have to use the boat to set the hook. You can't just set it with, just the stretch of the mono may not get it tight enough. On the beach, when we have 400 yards of line out, you might have seen this in some of our videos, we actually will run up the beach as fast as we can. We're real tight and we'll run in the opposite direction until that mono gets tight because, there's so much stretch. You have 400 yards of line out. That's an elastic band. You got to get tight. And if you don't get tight right away, the hook just falls right out of its mouth. That's really important. Even hooks like Super Mudus and Gamakatsus and Trocar lasers, they get dull. You always keep a file on you. Even though they come out of the box super sharp, you use them once, or even if you didn't catch a fish, there's a little bit of corrosion on there, they will get dull. So make sure you always touch them up. Next thing, I get a lot of questions about when to set the hook. A lot of people, they don't feel comfortable when to set the hook. So every shark feeds differently, right? So like a hammerhead, for example, is the hardest shark, in my opinion, I think to hook because they have a very weird shaped head. The leader can get tangled around their teeth, and they have a very small mouth. So it takes some time to eat it. And a lot of times they just sit there and play with it. So you always want to make sure that you give the shark enough time. And this is something you really can't put an equation on this. Can you do it you do it 20 seconds? Is it 30 seconds? You just got to evaluate the size of your bait you have versus the shark you're trying to hook. So if I'm trying to hook a 1,000-pound Mako and I'm throwing a 10-pound skipjack tuna, I'll eat that in 1 second, right? But if you're throwing a much bigger bait, to a smaller shark like a 300-pound blue shark or something, then he's not going to eat it as fast, right? So you want to make sure that you give it enough time for that bait. And if it's a really, really big bait, he may have to chomp on it for a good minute. But that's a good thing when you use circle hooks, you're not going to, most of the time you don't gut hook them. I mean, circle hooks still gut hook fish, but it's like 99% of the time it doesn't. So let me ask you a question here, guys. Raise your hands. How many people shark fish from the beach here? Awesome. So we're going to go over some shark fishing stuff right now from the beach. We're going to talk about gear first. So when I fish for sharks under 5 feet, like black tips or black nose or whatever, surf fishing tackle like this one right here, this little Saltiga, it's one of our combos on TackleDirect. That's plenty. You need a minimum of 300 yards of line. Have a lot of fun with them. A 5-foot shark's not going to weigh any more than 60 pounds. When you start going to sharks between 5 and 8 feet, you're going to want to use a 50 wide like that Accurate right there, or you're going to want to use a really serious spinning reel like this Dogfight or that Stella, that has good heavy drag and a good amount of line capacity. I recommend a minimum of 500 yards of line. can't tell you I've hooked how many big sharks I've hooked on my surf gear, and you just, when you don't have the line, like even a big blacktip, I've hooked some 160, 170 pound blacktips, and within 30 seconds they'll take 400 yards of line. Can't stop them with heavy drag. So it's really important to have really, a reel that can output a lot of drag and has a lot of line capacity. For bigger sharks between 8 and 12 feet, I would use an 80 wide like that Avid right there, or Shimano or whatever. Any 80 wide is pretty much good. You want to get a minimum of 700 to 800 yards of line on there. And if you're fishing for sharks over 12 feet, big hammers, tigers, makos, whatever, I just go 130. There's just, you don't know what you're going to hook. I mean, I've hooked fish so big. I had one fish I hooked on an Ali Techno 70-80, which is like basically a 70 size. This fish was running so fast, the entire reel components were shaking. It was moving so fast, and that was a heavy drag. So when you hook a really, really big fish on a small reel, you're going to get burned fast. I've seen 50 whites get spooled in less than a minute from the beach. So if you hook a big hammer in Florida, it takes no time at all. That fish is moving 20, 30 miles an hour, because it doesn't have a 50 wide only outputs. Maybe, unless you're using like maybe an Accurate or a Kyra or a T-Rex Avid, you're probably going to get 30 pounds of drag. And a big hammer can spool that in like 45 seconds. It's insane. When you see it, you won't believe it. How to find sharks on the beach. That's just something that, is hard to do. First thing you always want to do is make sure you check your local laws, because some states and some places don't like shark fishing from the beach. So always make sure that it's legal. Sharks love structure, and they like structure that holds bait. One of my go-to spots when I go shark fishing from the beach is to find inlets or waterways where bait's going to congregate. That's really important. Always look for artificial reef programs or any kind of structure, reefs, sandbars, inlets, tide erosion, rips, currents, whatever you got, drop-offs, anywhere where you think bait's going to congregate. Sharks. Chumming from the beach, let's talk about that for a sec. First off, I've tried it. It does not work. So if you think it's going to work, you can drop 100 pounds of chum out there. If you guys have heard of my term, the Blacktip Challenge, and actually this was my last year running. I'm no longer going to run that tournament, but we've had days where there was like 100 rods out on one beach with fresh, amazing baits, and not one person caught a shark. And you think about that, it's a chum slick. You're talking, and these guys are using rays, bonitas. They're using every bait thing, every different species of bait you can imagine, and they caught nothing. So it really doesn't do anything. It's all about if the sharks are there, like if they're highly concentrated. If the sharks are feeding on jack crevalles that are a mile down the beach, and you have stingrays and bonitas out, they're not going to touch that. They're going to stay with their food source. So if you've tried doing it, and also it doesn't look good, guys. Don't like when you drop block to chum around where people are swimming. People get offended about that. It's bringing to my next point. Always avoid fishing near guarded beaches. That might be a great fishing spot. Just don't do it when people are swimming there. You know, in Florida right now, this is one of the reasons why I'm stopping the tournament. Land-based shark fishing is under attack. That's why you don't see me posting a lot of land-based shark fishing videos right now, is because they're trying to ban it. There's a big movement trying to get rid of it, and you know, we have to be responsible anglers. We have to fish responsibly. We got to clean up. We got to make sure that they can't make any excuses why, they can't make an excuse against shark fishermen or against fishermen in general. You want to make sure that you always fish outside of a guarded beach area. I don't know if you guys have the same thing up here where a lifeguard's on duty and then there's a sign that says end of guarded beach. You always want to fish outside of that. You know, and the lifeguard's not there at night. You can fish there all night long if you want. So just make sure that you guys really just be mindful of those other people, because I don't want, this is the only way for people that don't have a boat or people that want to really have a challenge to pursue a really big fish from the beach, and you don't want to see those privileges get taken away. You know, that's something you want to keep for your children's children. Now we're going to talk a little bit about offshore shark fishing. And obviously this varies based on where you are, but the first thing we're going to talk about is the gear, right? So, and this gets a little more technical than the beach. So your gear depends on the size of the shark you're targeting and the depth of your water. So, for example, if I'm in the Bahamas and I'm fishing on the flats, well, it drops off to 1,000 feet within 50 yards, right? So there's these giant 15-foot tigers that hang on the flats there. If you hook one, he's heading to that deep water. That's his refuge. So if you're fishing a light tackle reel, like a 50 wide, and you get a 1,000-pound shark that takes you down over 1,000 feet, you're never going to get that fish to the boat. You never. You're fishing. You're not just fighting the fish anymore. You're fighting all that water weight that fish is. And if he turns on his side, you just can't move it. When I fish really deep water, I only fish at 130. Because it has so much more winching power than and every turn you're gaining so much more line. So that's what you really got to take into consideration. And you got to make sure you have the right drag. If you're fishing shallow water like in the Keys or in the flats back here maybe, like you guys don't have the problem we have in Florida where it drops off to 1,000 feet within 10 miles. So if you hook a shark in 100 feet of water here, you can catch a 1,000-pound fish on a 30 wide, because he can't spool you. You can just chase him down with the boat. But if you go to the canyons out here or you go to deep water and you hook a 1,000-pound fish and he dives and he gets into an underwater current, and you have all that line, that scope, when you have a fish take you down that far from the beach or from the boat, all that line, you're fighting that creates its own pressure too. And there's different currents at different depths. So you might be fighting current and fish and water weight and everything all at the same time. So you definitely want to make sure you have the right tackle for the certain depth you're fishing. And you just want to, like in the Keys, for example, I caught a 500-pound hammerhead on an 80 wide, right? And after I did, I was like, you know what? I could have done that on a spinning rod almost, basically, because it's only 15 feet deep. You just follow him with the boat until he gets tired, right? But at the same time, you don't want to do that because you don't want to fight him for too long. So finding sharks offshore, this can actually be pretty challenging. Sometimes you're in that one spot you've gone to for a long time. You're like, oh, they're always here, and you go there and they're not there, right? So sharks are always moving, always. Like people in Florida think that we have bull sharks all the time. Our bull sharks are all migratory fish. In the wintertime, they're all gone. In the springtime right now, they all came back. And I don't even know where they go. No one really has tracked them much. They move all through the Caribbean and the Bahamas. But when they come, they like to hang around certain structure, like ledges, reefs. You would be surprised if you find a good rip offshore. You could find a whole bunch of sharks in that rip. I mean, I've seen it. When we're fishing for sailfish, sargassum, floating debris. If you guys can find something that came up through the Gulf Stream and it has a whole bunch of little fish on it, there's probably a good chance there's a big shark within 2 or 3 mile radius that's staying around because that's a good food source. When you go into the deep water out there, the pelagic fish, those fish, and they have a rough life. They really do. They can go days without eating. So when they find a good food source, they're going to stick with it. If you look at like a mahi, for example, those things, I mean, when they're really hungry, you can throw your flip-flop on a hook and they'll eat it. It doesn't matter. We've actually, the drift boats in Florida have filleted them and pulled flip-flops and all kinds of weird stuff out of their stomach. So don't be surprised what they're going to eat. In Australia, for blue marlin and black marlin, I forget the names of the guys that did it. They were trolling rubber chickens, and they were hooking granders on rubber chickens. So when these fish are hungry, they'll eat pretty much anything. But that's the thing, you got to find where they're hanging out, and they'll hang around. Most of the time, they're going to hang around a good food source. Like for example, in Florida right now, we have the bonita or false albacore start showing up, and this is when, right now, if you go offshore, you're going to catch bull sharks mostly, and you might catch a sandbar. But when the bonitas show up with false albacore, we get duskies, silkies, reef sharks. We get like 7, 8 different species of sharks that follow that bait source. So I don't know what it's like out here with your tuna fishery and that, but I imagine when those tuna show up, if you want to catch big makos, just find the tuna. If you're you can set up a chum slick and you can chum in the open ocean. I've done this for all day long. You'll never see a single shark. And the same thing in Florida. I mean, you'd think, like, I'm only 4 miles off the beach, man. Come on, there's got to be a shark here somewhere, right? No, it is. You can go all day and not see one. You want to find, and once you start marking some bait, if the fish are down 500 feet, don't matter. There's bait there. Those sharks will come up if you start creating enough attraction for them. One thing I like doing a lot, and we're going to the chumming right now, having a good chum slick is super important, right? So I always like to mix things up. One thing I like to do is just try to get a food chain reaction going. So I like to use little glass minnows or little bait fish, frozen, whatever, and I try to get little fish come to my boat. Because if you can get the little fish feeding, whatever they are, then that gets the sharks to go, hey, what's going on up there? What's all that commotion? They're going to come up and check it out. They're very curious fish. And one thing I like to do is I like to get a lot of little chunks of false albacore or other fish, and you want to have it just float down. So it looks like, hey, something's feeding up there. When you have little debris, of chunks of meat floating down in the depths, if a shark's down 800 feet and he starts finding those little debris pieces, he's going to follow that all the way up because he's going to think, oh man, there's a feeding frenzy going on out there. And it's just you having some bonitas out there or tuna. But that really gets their attention. And having, if you want to, like in Florida, I keep a false albacore on my stringer, or 2 or 3 of them, always. And actually, I rarely ever use Menhaden chum or any of that stuff. I never ever use that stuff. I always think, hey, the fish is going to be the best chum. And a 15-pound false albacore will last 5 hours of just continual blood and chum. So they work really, really well. And from the beach, obviously, don't do it. But so now, guys, we're going to go and talk. Actually, well, before I get to the heavy drag thing, I want to ask if there's any questions about shark fishing.
I have a couple questions. You said you were talking about mono and stuff. Do you prefer mono over braid and all the other?
I do. Great question, guys. So I'm just going to re-say your question for the camera. So he asked about what do I prefer, mono or braid? When it comes to catching big fish, I like to give this analogy. Those fitness bands that are just based on your tension? That's what your monofilament is to a fish. Braid is just, there's no stretch, right? So it's just a straight up tug of war. When you have mono, because of its stretch, it's like it works against the fish. So I always use braid for my backing. I prefer never to have my braid in the water, if possible. If you fish in deep water, it's going to go in no matter what, but I prefer to always have mono in at all times. Because you never know, like a little mackerel might swim by and bite he might have his mouth open, he might hit your braid, you lost him, fish is gone. At least if he hits that mono, it has forgiveness. It can take a beating. It can get, if you have a huge shark and he freaks out and you got him inside the boat and he goes underneath the boat and that braid hits the bottom of your boat and you got barnacles or you got something on there, gone instantly. If you have mono, it can withstand that. And one thing, guys, I'm going to teach you a little secret right now about mono. This took me years to figure this out. So I would when I was fishing on the beach, I would hook these huge sharks all the time, and I'd lose them all. Like, what the heck's going on here? I lose them for all these different reasons, right? And one reason I found was my line. Mono, back to the stretch thing, can only be stretched so much and so many times before it loses its strength. So You try it. I mean, we don't have enough room here to try it here, but if you take a scale, you take 130-pound mono, 200-pound mono, and you put as much drag as possible, stretch as much as you can, and then let it go, put the scale on again, it's going to get weaker every time. And after every big fish I catch, or every time I use heavy drag, I cut all the mono off and I put all new line on every single time. Because, I've lost so many huge fish that were that fish of a lifetime because I didn't change. If you don't change your line, that's when it happens. You're going to lose that big fish. And you think about it like when you're fishing heavy drag, like sometimes from the beach we're fishing 80 pounds of drag, on a fish. And like that one video, giant shark defeats 2 experienced fishermen, sustained 80 pounds of drag during the entire fight. And we went up to 100 pounds and he was still pulling. And we were below half spool. So at half spool, that 100 pounds of drag is probably 180 pounds of drag. So, and then you also have the bow of the line in the water. So you want to make sure, like when I shark fish and I catch big sharks, I only use 200-pound braid and 200-pound mono. I don't even waste time with 130. 130 will pop every time, and it stretches a lot more. The lower strength mono will always stretch more than the higher strength mono. So yeah, I would highly recommend using mono. But have the braid there for peace of mind, because if you hook a really big fish, and he goes down deep. Line capacity. This is what I'm going to get into right now. Well, actually, let me ask this question: what is more important, line capacity or drag, just to catch big fish? What's more important? All right. Who thinks line capacity? Who thinks drag? Okay, it's drag, and we're gonna show you right now. I'm gonna do a demonstration. So we're gonna set this reel to 30 pounds of drag. 30 pounds of drag is a lot of drag in a stand-up harness, right? I mean that's hard to hold, right? But to a big fish, I mean to any of you guys right here, you guys can pull 30 pounds of drag for 500 yards, like nothing, just by walking. It's nothing. So who do we got for volunteer here? Okay. So I'm going to hold the scale. We're going to set it to 30 pounds of drag.
Should I put it in my mouth?
I would not recommend it. So let's set that. Just pull it. Tell me when it gets to 30 pounds. Here, you know what? I'm going to go a little bit over here. Yeah, it's set to default right now. Yep. Just pull on it real good. What's that at right there?
20.
Okay, let's go a little higher. What's that at now? Pull.
24. 32.
Okay, so I'm going to stand right here. I want you to just walk all the way to the end down there. Just keep walking. Just hold the line in your hand. It don't matter. You can just like that. Yeah, just keep walking. Is that hard? Are you getting tired yet? No? Keep going. How long could you do that for? You could keep going, right? You could run a marathon, right?
Absolutely.
That's nothing. Okay, so let's jack this drag up. Let's turn our preset up here. All right, so come back here. Now we're gonna try this with 70 pounds of drag.
You got anybody bigger in there? Yeah.
Oh, you'll be fine. We're gonna bottom out that scale.
Hey, John, you want to join me on this one? Where are we at now?
I don't know. That scale only goes to 50. It's hard, right? How long can you do that for? Yeah. So.
We bottomed this thing out.
Oh yeah, but you see, like that was a lot more exhausting than the other one, right?
Absolutely.
So the drag is going to stop your big fish. It's not going to be. That's why, and you just saw the way. I'm going to show you guys that technique I just used right there. But Ben Chancey from Chewing This, I fish with him a lot, and he's one of the pioneers of using heavy drag, and he taught me a lot of this stuff. Like when you use these big fish, like even tuna, like if you rail one of these rods on a grander, and you put 100 pounds of drag on them, you're gonna crush them. He can't pull drag that far for that long. That's really hard to do. Same thing with big sharks. But the problem with using that, and when you use that much drag, guys, I'm gonna tell you this straight up, you can't do that alone. You need a spotter. This is the same thing when you use heavy drag. It's the same as going to the gym and powerlifting or bench pressing. You have to make sure someone's watching your back, because I don't trust these reels. I don't care how good they're made. I don't trust them. Because when you use that much drag and you clip into a harness, if that reel fails, locks up, you're gone. I've been pulled in. You've seen my video. So you know, and I'll tell you that story. I mean, you know, that was the guy I was with. He wasn't really spotting me, and I didn't have a lot of drag then. I think I had like 70, 80 pounds, which is, you know, pretty good amount of drag. And I lost my footing. I brought a bonito in the boat. I cut him up, and there was blood on the deck, and I slipped, and I fell in. And when I went, and what you didn't see in that video is there were 5 bull sharks right underneath me when I went in, circling the boat. So I was in the water with all 5 bull sharks and half a dozen 500-pound Goliaths. And I was being dragged down. And the most amazing thing, I can't explain this. This makes no sense to me. As I was going down, all of a sudden I started going up. And so it's like someone was lifting me out of the water. It was really weird. It's the grace of God because if I had gone down further and faster, like I had to back the drag down extremely slowly. And I'm not gonna lie, when I was in that water, I've never been so calm in my life. Like I was like totally relaxed. Like I can't explain it, you know. And I just backed the drag down very, very slowly, and I just swam up, you know. And that was Florida water. It was warm water. I don't know what would happen if I got dragged in this water. You know, it's pretty cold up here, so you don't want that to happen. All right, and you know, one thing that you saw, that scale we had right there. That scale goes to 50. I always make sure I check the drag on my reels before I decide what I'm going fishing for. Like if I'm going fishing for big sharks or Goliath groupers, I make sure my reels are maxed out, and I test them on the scale every time. Because like for example, when I pull this reel out of the box, all the manufacturers do this. This preset knob is all the way down. There might be 10 pounds of drag on this reel. So don't just think because it's out of the box that you're going to have the right pressure. And if you've ever sent your reel in for repair, the same thing. They always put this down all the way because they don't want pressure on the drag plates. So always make sure you test your drag, you know. And you never know. You give your reel to your buddy, and he doesn't know what he's doing. He's playing with this, and you know, whatever. You think, oh, it's cool. And then you get it back, and it's got 12 pounds of drag on it, you know. So you know, always make sure you test your reels to make sure that they're outputting exactly what you want. And when you have to build a comfort zone with using heavy drag. You can't just. I mean, I've done it to people, and I think it's kind of funny. But I'm there watching them. You know, like I had. If you've seen our video with Justin from Lake Fork guy, I just strapped him into an 80 wide and said, "There you go, buddy. You can just go for it." You know, and he hooked the Goliath, and he had 70 pounds of drag, and he was hurting. You know, but yeah, I mean, you know, I was there watching. I was making sure nothing would happen. But you know, if you're doing this on your own, you want to make sure that you really build a comfort zone. And you know, that like you just saw, like you want to make sure that you know you can use your body weight on the reel. And I'm going to go over this technique right now, actually. So, what's your name again?
Dave.
What is it? Dave. So Dave, I want you to grab this line, and we're going to, so most people, when you're in a fighting plate, like one of these things here, all right, I'm not going to put it on, but, you know, look at how far away the reel is from my body, right? It's far, right? So, yeah, you can lean back, and you can put your weight in it, but if you're on a boat with 4 to 5 foot waves and head shakes on the fish, it's not happening, you know. I mean, and if you get turned, the boat gets turned because there's a gust of wind, and then you go sideways, that can pop out. I mean, I've had it happen. Trust me, it's scary, you know. So the further away the reel is from your body, the more you're going to use your arms. You know, obviously, if you're in a stand-up harness, you're going to use your butt muscles in that. But you know, if you're not in a full harness, if the reel's this far away, you're using your arms. Your arms are the weakest part of your body. Your arms, I don't care. I have a guy coming down for a video. He's a monster. He does like, I think he deadlifts 900 pounds. He's huge. And I'm gonna prove all this, like, you know, with this fighting plate. I'm gonna put him on a fighting plate. I'm gonna have him fight a Goliath grouper with 100 pounds of drag. I'm gonna see if he can hold it. He won't be able to do it, you know, because it's impossible. Because your arms will develop so much lactic acid so fast they just burn out. So you have to use your body weight. And this is where like Ben Chancey taught me this technique when we were fighting the Goliaths. So you see how my feet are basically are basically like parallel to my rod. And you're just tucking this underneath your leg on your butt muscle. And as I'm putting on the scale here. As the drag gets higher, I'll start low. You know, you don't need we're probably like about 20 pounds of drag now. So like, you pull on that, and I'm resting the rod. I'm putting this up against my hip, right? This is for the. This obviously you don't want to do this on the beach. This is for the boat, and this is where the gunnel is right here. From the beach, this does not work. Don't do it.
Wearing boxers?
Yeah, no, just don't do it. It's terrible. So you see, I put that vinyl tubing in my videos on my rod. I make sure I can rest the rod on the boat, right? And I'm keeping this reel. I'm holding one hand's always on the handle, other hand's right here, and I'm pushing the reel up against my hips, right? And my entire hips are aligned with basically the rod, right? So you pull now, and like, I don't need to put much pressure on it, right? So when he pulls, I'm gonna put full drag right here. Actually, you know what? I pressed that preset. See, I gotta test that preset again. Here. So as the pressure gets higher, keep going. I have to sit. See how I'm sitting deeper and deeper? The more you sit deeper, the more you can hold. Because you at that point you're using your entire body weight. And I weigh 150 pounds soaking wet, and I can fish 120 pounds of drag. On a stand-up harness, I do a cartwheel and be gone. So, it's just, I'm gonna put it all the way to full. As I see it, like I'm sitting deeper, right? Remember the boat's right here, so like this part of the rod is gonna rest on that gunnel, and as the drag gets, you can fight. I mean, you try it. I want you to try it. How much you weigh?
110.
110. You can hold this no problem. Here, so I want you to bring this foot this way. Okay, you want to line your hips with the rod. Okay. Now you're gonna. It's just like a squat. You're using your butt muscles, your leg muscles, and your back muscles. So I want you one hand on the. There you go. Okay. And here, reel up a little bit. As the drag gets heavier, I want you to sit deeper. Okay. So as he pulls, just sit deeper. Sit deeper. I want you to sit.
Yes, your legs are too far.
So
Just don't let go.
yeah. So right here, you see how your legs. So like you're doing this right here, right? So I want you to make your legs straight. Make them straight.
You feel
Like
it?
that?
Frederick, you got it.
See, you would now. You think you could hold that? Here, I want you to try doing this here. So just try holding that like that. Yeah. No, try it. You see what happens?
Yeah.
You got yanked off your center of gravity. So by getting low in that, you're allowing you're creating you have so much more balance, right?
Like that?
You want to keep your knees bent, yeah, and you just want to hold it. Now, is this for a sustained long fight? No, you can't do this. You can't. This is for beating fish really fast and hard using extreme drag. When I fight a big fish, like if I hook a big hammer or something huge that I know it's going to fight for an hour, I put a harness on, and I keep the rod in the same spot, but I allow the harness to hold the reel, so I can rest. Because you can do this for about 20 minutes, and then you're done. So. You put the harness on. Here, actually, I'll put this harness on
So
quickly.
are you changing the drag? I mean, that may be a very pedestrian question, but are you changing the drag depending on the fish?
Yeah.
Protect you, protect the equipment as well. So if you're depending on the fish in the fight, like you'll change it up.
Exactly. So if I'm fishing for this reel, like for example, like this reel, this is a great reel for pretty much anything. You can catch bluefins, you can catch marlin, you can catch everything. So if I was fishing for marlin, I'd back this down. I wouldn't want more than 20 pounds of drag, maybe 30 at most, because, any fish, I forgot to bring this up, any fish that jumps, like a mako, a marlin, any billfish, a blacktip, you don't want to use heavy drag on them, because they're going to jump and break the hook, break the swivels, with that much, when they come out of the water and they put torque on your leader, something's going to go. It's guaranteed to happen. So the first thing that usually goes is like your hook. Your hook will just bend out. Even something like this big, 16-0 demon that can catch a huge fish. I've straightened those out like a needle. It just goes because there's something has to give. So you want to make sure that if you match your drag, like you said, with your species. So if I'm fishing for Goliath groupers, for example, which is a brutal fight, and they go straight down, they head straight for structure, so. You want to put as much pressure as possible to stop the fish as fast as possible, right? But if I'm fishing for bull sharks, I don't want to do that at all, because bull sharks have these extremely violent head shakes, and you'll get yanked overboard. It actually, like I've done it before, and your shoulders, they feel like they got ripped out of your socket, because you're just getting yanked like this the whole time, because they're trying to move and they can't. They're just doing these extremely violent head shakes. Same thing with tuna. when they're doing their little death rolls. So you want to, as a tuna, I mean, here's the way I look at it, right? You can use heavy drag. You want to know what it takes. This is something you're going to learn over time, right? For like a bull shark, once you hit about 45, 50 pounds of drag, they ain't moving. It's not happening. But that allows you enough drag, so if he starts to go really nuts, he can still pull it. But if you put 100 pounds of drag on a bull shark, you're just asking for trouble. But like something like a mako, I would probably fish a mako 20 pounds of drag. Let him jump, let him do his crazy, stupid things, and then when he's finished, done, and he doesn't want to jump anymore, then put some more pressure on him. And that's where you want to. That's why it's so important to have a scale, because you want to set your reel. Like say this is, and it's different like on every reel, right? So like let's say I want to put my lever there. So when I know when it hits this eyelet right here, it has 20 pounds of drag. Okay, and then when I go to strike right here, it has maybe 70 pounds of drag. So if you hook a really big fish and you're in the canyons out here and he goes 3,000 feet deep or some of that. I don't know how deep it is out there, but I imagine it's deep. You have the drag to stop him if he dives. And but like a blue shark, for example, they don't really fight much. So you could probably, if you want to have fun, you could probably go 15 pounds of drag, right? I mean, I've never caught a blue shark. I don't know. I imagine they fight like a nurse shark. They just roll around, right? So if you put a lot of drag on him, he's probably just going to sit there and tangle up your leader. So yeah, you definitely. This is where you want to have multiple rods, multiple reels. Like I like to have a rod for everything I do. So like I have my 130. I bring that out in case I see that great white shark, or I see a big mako, or I see something I really want to catch. It's huge. I don't want to. And then I'll bring my 50. I'll bring one of these out. This is that combo for catching bull sharks and catching duskies and that, because it's still fun. Catching a bull shark on a 130 is not fun. It's just annoying actually. But catching them on this, you get to feel a little bit of the fight, right? But you always want to bring, because like I look at it, right? Like I never used to live in Florida. I actually used to live in Canada. So when I got to come down there, it was a real treat, right? So I wanted to make the best of my opportunity when I was down there, and I didn't want to. When I lost a fish, I may not get a shot to catch that fish again for a whole year or more. So I wanted to make sure I was as prepared as possible so I wouldn't fail. And that's where it comes to. You want to make sure you want to have different gear ready for that one fish that might swim by that you see. It may not be a shark, it may be a tuna, it may be a marlin, whatever. You want to have something ready at all times to target that specific size fish. And like I said, you always want to have your spinning rods, because you don't know what. You could go out there right now and you might find something amazing. You might find a whale carcass. I mean, you might. Who knows? And then that's going to be the best fishing day of your life, and you only brought a 50 wide. So always make sure you're the right tackle for what you're targeting.
I have a question, two questions actually.
Uh-huh.
When you, I watched a couple of your videos, and it's actually two videos that stick out when you talk about applying drag from the beach. One happens to be at Sebastian Inlet, and I think you guys are fishing for reds, and then your buddy paddled out a bait into the
Mm-hmm.
inlet, and he loses the fish. I mean, you can clearly see he was ready to go, and you said to him something like, you had so much more line left. Is it premature set, like for people who get a big run to set that?
Yeah, the most important thing when you're fighting a big fish is to stay calm. Don't get nervous. If you get nervous, that's what happened. That's what happened in that video. We just went like this, and there wasn't, then what happened, what I think, I still don't know to this day why the line broke. That should not have broke, but what I think happened, we went from a low drag to a high drag so fast, I think there was a little loop that created, and it got caught on a guide and it snapped. I still don't know, but you always want to make sure that you stay as calm as possible. And it's hard because you see a huge fish or you hook something that's, if you're down a third spool and he's still going, you start hitting the panic button, right? So, you got to stay calm. I've taken a lot of fish to the knot, and you can stop a lot of fish at the knot. I always make sure I tie a really good knot at the bottom, because I'll lose all my line to stop that fish. I don't care. You can stop a big fish at the knot.
And my second question is, you said you should always be ready for that next fish that you're going to catch.
Yeah.
There's a video that really sticks out, and you say, go get my Makara, and it was a blacktip getting followed in the shore
Yeah.
by a hammer. Were you anticipating on
I was.
paddling back out to try to catch that hammer?
I had those rods there for that. That hammerhead was hanging around that beach. I saw him every day. So I was like, I was like, okay, I'm going to burn him there just in case I see him. And I actually had a 25-pound false albacore out there, and he didn't want that. That shark would eat only, that shark only wanted to eat black tips. I had an enormous false albacore, fresh as can be. He had no interest in that at all. He just wanted to eat a black tip. That's what I say, like, when they key in on one thing, that's all they want. You can't bribe them with anything else.
How big do you think that was?
That was a 14-footer. That was probably 1,200 pounds. Yeah, I mean, he's eating 80-pound sharks every day. I mean, it's a pretty serious fish.
You see guys fishing off jetties all the time.
Uh-huh.
Do you recommend it or not for a shark?
I don't recommend land. That's a good question, actually. So, guys, he asked a question about, I'm just talking to the camera here. He asked a question about fishing from a jetty. Now, fishing from a jetty, here, let me take that back there. Yeah, you don't need to keep standing. So, fishing from a jetty means there's two problems with it. One, your own safety, and two, the safety of the shark. First off, it's very, very bad to land sharks on rocks. They die. I've seen it happen. So if you can land a shark on the beach, that's always the best situation. And like, for example, in South Africa, they only fish from rocks. It's very hard to find a nice beach down there. So sometimes you have to do what you have to do in order to catch fish. But you got to find the right rocks. Like, for example, when I fish off jetties all the time. Before I even start fishing, I plan how I'm going to land this fish, right? So I look for a really flat rock. I look for somewhere where I can get down and get ready to land that fish. And not just sharks, that's everything. If you're going to fish if you hook an 80-pound striper, you're not going to jump on some crazy rocks to go grab them. So you got to make sure that you, well, yeah, but, I mean, that's a huge fish, but like, saying like you're going to get really excited, but are you willing to lose your life over that, right? I mean, if the current's ripping and you get people have died that way, so you got to make sure you plan your route, basically. And if there is no route, just cut the line when you get the shark in and let them go. Don't even try to bring them up because they're just going to, most of the time their heart is right underneath the pectoral fin, and if that gets hit by a rock, they're done. They'll die really, really fast. And the other thing with landing sharks, guys, from the shore, it's very important not to drag the whole shark up when it's a big shark. A little shark, they're fine, but a really big shark, they live in a neutral, buoyant environment. So when you take a huge shark that weighs 500-600 plus pounds, and you put him on dry sand or on wet sand, his organs are getting crushed by his body weight. You'll see pictures. It sucks when you see it. The belly's like this outward. That's the organs getting crushed. And those sharks, some of them die. So it's always like best to keep their head in the wash. So the waves are flushing underneath their bellies and keeping them pretty much, pretty well. Like I know, like some beaches out here, like I fished in Chatham, and it drops off like 15 feet right away. So you could keep the head out on the trough and bring the body up. As long as the organs and that are being supported by water, the fish is fine.
And I like the fact that you said the circle hook versus J hooks.
Mm-hmm.
I go down to Florida over the wintertime a lot. And, not bragging, but I got over 130 sharks and 30 black groupers. And two of those fish were gut hooked because of the circle hooks. But also what I do is I grind the barbs off.
Yeah.
I've been working with a lot of kids down there. And they're seeing some of these shows where guys are using trailer hooks and cable, double hooks by yourself on the beach. Can you share how dangerous that is with some of these new guys?
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you straight up. I used to use 2 hooks all the time because I never there's nothing wrong with using 2 hooks if you're prepared. But here's the danger with 2 hooks. If you use a multiple hook rig, only one of them is going to stick in the shark. If both of them get stuck in the shark's mouth, you're probably not going to catch that fish because they're going to pull each other out. But either 2 things happen. One, the first hook hits, and then the trailer hook is flinging outside the shark's body, which means that if you're trying to grab that shark, that hook is just sitting there. And it happened to a friend of mine. He had the hook go all the way through his Achilles tendon and out the other side. And he was lucky it was a blacktip. If I was a nurse shark, a nurse shark is a pansy shark, but that's the worst shark ever to land on the beach because they sit there and roll like a crocodile. If that was a nurse shark, he would have lost his foot. It would have ripped it all off because it would have kept going. So I don't use 2 hooks anymore ever because that's where you want to use the right size bait. Just use a smaller piece of bait, you know, and use a good size circle hook. The other thing, using, you brought up cable, for example.
Cable versus single strand?
Yeah, I never ever use cable, guys, ever. I used to use cable until Blacktip started biting through 600-pound cable, and I was like, there's no way, if a 80-pound shark's biting through 600-pound cable, there's no way I'm going to land a grander on cable. And what happens is, this is how they would do it, and this is how all sharks do it. The cable gets stuck between the teeth, okay? And the cable's most of the time is 49 strand. So what happens is when the blacktips come out of the water and they spin, a lot of people call them spinner sharks, they're not, they're blacktips. When they spin, the cable's still, they clench their jaw, and that cable's stuck in a position. And as they spin, the cable is kinking strand by strand and just shreds. And then, you know, not every strand will break, like you cut it with a thing. It'll break in different sections, and then it just kinks off like wire, and it's gone. Other thing is you hook big sharks out here that roll, like a big tiger or something that's going to roll, or even a mako. If he gets that right angle when he jumps, he'll get that right angle. With the amount of torque he generates, the cable just undoes. It just falls apart and it's gone. So like when I target big sharks, I always use 2 strands of number 19 wire to make sure that I've never had that ever fail, ever. 1 strand, I've had it fail many times. 2 strands, never. It's hard to tie, but it's almost a guarantee that you're going to get a shark.
Circle hooks or octopus hooks, and like what's the difference between?
Not a fan of octopus hooks. You lose a lot of fish on those. It's pretty much a J hook that has a little bend at the top, you know. So I recommend using the Billfish Foundation has created great standards for how a circle hook should look, and I would recommend using a Billfish approved hook. You know, using offset circle hooks, they work, but you're also going to gut hook more fish with an offset circle hook versus a non-offset. And you brought up barbs, for example. Like, I'm not going to lie, I never take my barbs off. It does make it harder to remove the hook.
Not during tournaments.
Oh, no, definitely not. But, you know, you can take your barbs off too. One thing that I've had happen, I have fish barbed with hooks though, and a lot of times when I'm leadering the fish, he starts doing those crazy head shakes. Sometimes the hooks just fall out right there. But, you know, if you're not fishing a tournament, if you're not trying to keep the shark, then hey, we call that a Palm Beach release. You know, he swam off.
I've saved about $300 in hooks doing that too.
Oh yeah. Any more questions?
I was in Madeira Beach this past March.
Uh-huh.
I went to a state park further up the road, and there were greenbacks everywhere and Spanish mackerel everywhere, and I could not hook up to a shark. Is there any reasons as to why?
So where's this location at?
Madeira Beach,
Where-
the Gulf side of Florida.
Okay, so the Gulf side of Florida, first off, here's something that we can burn up here actually. Shallow water, if you have a shelf, right? Like the Gulf of Florida gets deep, right? Like what, 70 miles out there? So that shelf that is from like 5 feet to like 100 feet, it's like 60 miles, that holds a lot of bait, right? So the longer the shelf is, the more spread out the bait can get, right? On the east coast of Florida, for example, the shelf reaches a maximum of 30 miles, you know, and that's why you'll see in places like down like Miami and Fort Lauderdale, there's actually not a lot of bait. That's where like in Miami, you'll find bait in Key Biscayne because it's a longer shelf. So what might have happened there, you might have found a whole bunch of fish, but 5 miles away, there might have been a whole bunch more fish because there's so much bait on that can hold on that shelf. Bait doesn't want to hang out in the open water. They're doomed. Those shred fins or mullet or whatever, they can't, you know, they feel a lot safer when they can hug bottom or they can move along structure, you know, than if they're in the open. Like during the mullet run, we filmed it for 3 years now, and those mullet will never go in deep water ever because they know they're screwed. They always hug the beach because they know that, you know, they can at least get away. You know, when they get in the open, things can come from every angle to get them. So I've seen days like that where you have bait. I've had days where I could pick up sardines and throw them in the air like popcorn, and there's nothing there. You know, just because there might be a whole lot of bait somewhere else, and that's where the sharks are. Like I said, it's highly concentrated. You know, and there's not a lot of sharks out there. People think, oh, there's so many of them. They're not. You know, when these guys lose their sharks, their snappers and their tunas to sharks, it's because that's where the sharks are. You know, if they're hooking tuna where there's no sharks, they're never gonna get bit off. Any other questions?
For sharks,
Mhm.
it's legal for bait in New Jersey.
Don't know. I think I really haven't read the regulations in New Jersey, so I imagine bluefish are good bait. I don't know if striped bass are legal. I don't think so, but maybe a carcass. I don't know. See, like in Florida, what I do, the law states that a fish must become to shore in whole condition. It has to be landed. So what I do when I bring out cobia carcasses, like for example, cobia, you're allowed one per person, right? And I love using cobia carcasses because big sharks love eating cobia. I'll take a picture of my cooler before I head out, so I have physical proof if I ever get pulled over by a game warden. Look, I didn't catch these fish and fillet them out here. I brought these with me, and you know I don't think there's a law that says you can't use a carcass for bait. Like you could probably use any species you want for bait in terms of a carcass. So I would just have photographic evidence to show that you physically brought that before you went on the boat. Any more questions?
That's the most on in Florida. I was surf fishing in Stewart, and I hooked up with probably like 8 or so. I thought they were spinners, but you said they're blacktips.
Yeah.
And I broke off every single time, or they spit the hook.
When I first started fishing blacktips, I lost 19 out of 20 sharks. It just, what happened, you have to, blacktips are very hard to catch, you know, because they jump, they charge, they go absolutely insane, you know, and they spin. There's a lot of variables that can make you lose that fish. So my secret to getting the secret to getting a blacktip on is to make sure, one, you have extremely sharp hooks. Two, you have he gets hooked right away. I like to, my reel, when I have in the sand spike, when I'm waiting for a bite, I probably have 15 pounds of drag on that reel. I make sure my pike is extremely deep in the sand. So, because what happens is a lot of sharks, instead of just grabbing with their teeth, they suck in the bait. So when you have a small bait and he sucks it in and he turns his head, that sort of hooks in the corner of his mouth every time. So if you use a heavier drag in the beginning with a small bait, you're going to hook him every single time. Then all you have to do is keep the line tight. Now, if you're breaking terminal tackle on that, that means you're using too much drag and you got to back your drag down a little bit.
So you don't let it, you don't put it on free run? You just
No way, no. Some people do. My friends do that, but I tried everything, you know, and the free run thing, what happens is they can run with it and then they spit it. I mean, you might be 20 yards away from your rod, they might run 30 feet and then they spit it. But if he runs 1 inch with a tight drag, that hook's going in the corner of his mouth every time.
Is there a water temp or a certain month?
I'm sorry.
A water temp or a month here that you would start fishing for sharks?
Okay, so he's asking about water temperature. This is where, honestly, I've never really observed water temperature as much being in Florida. I know one thing though, water temperature does move fish, but I think if you learn, like I said, talking about the migrations, if you learn the pattern of migrations, like every year is different, right? So like, for example, like you may have a warm current come up here, or you might have an upwelling that might cool things down. Something might happen that might push fish away. So you want to learn where fish are at certain times of the year, right? Like I don't know what goes off on offshore out here in the summer months or versus the winter months. I really don't. I don't fish up here much, but you're probably going to see more variety of species in the summertime because the water's warmer. So, you know, learning when fish show up, when they don't show up, and it's going to change based on locations. You know, some species, like there are local fish that like to hang around, and there are fish that are migratory. So like I've learned that with all, not just sharks, snook, tarpon, redfish, everything. There's locals, and then there's big pods and big schools that are migratory. You know, so if you learn where the fish are always moving to, and you know, being up here, you have a lot more water cover. It's harder probably. You have what is it, like 80 miles to the canyon or something like that? You know, it's a lot of water. You know, so I would start off with your bait and then try to find your predators. Those makos, like if you're targeting makos out here, they're going to move. Those things move a lot. You know, and they could be here in the winter. They could be here in the summer. I mean, they're going to follow a food source.
Like I know, like, and we've been in our boat, like off Island Beach, and late, like June into July and August, you see thresher right off the beach.
Is there food there for them to feed on?
Yeah.
That's it. Like if it was like really cold out, and there was a ton of food for them to feed on, they don't care because they're gonna go after that meal. Water temperature does affect it, but if there's a good food source and a temperature that wouldn't normally make sense, the sharks are still going to stay there and eat. Obviously, you're not going to find a Goliath grouper up here, because they don't come up here. But we see great whites in Florida, right? I mean, it's pretty rare because the water's pretty warm down there. But they come down because they're following food, And the same thing, you see big hammerheads out here. They're more normally in Florida, but they come up because they're following food in the Gulf Stream. They're following food up. So wherever the food is, that's where they're going to be. Any more questions?
Down in Florida, what do the grouper usually feed on by like bridges and piers and stuff?
Anything you put in the water.
Anything?
Yeah. Anything. The Goliaths, actually, a really good bait for Goliaths is actually remoras. I use remoras when the sharks are around and I want to catch a Goliath because the sharks won't eat them. See, Goliath groupers and other big groupers, they have a very, very sad life. 70% of their diet is crabs, sand crabs. They can't, contrary to most popular belief that people think they eat snappers and good eating fish, other groupers, they don't. They can't catch them. They eat sand crabs. You'll see footage of Goliaths. They'll leave the wrecks and they'll go and suck the sand up and just eat crabs all day. And when we catch them, they puke up crabs. That's why when you hook a snapper or something, man, imagine if you ate, this is the equivalent. Imagine if you ate bugs your whole life and someone put a filet mignon in front of you. You're going to eat that filet, So that's what they're eating. They're eating bugs. They're bug eaters. So when you put a Jack Crevalle or a stingray down there, man, they never get to see that. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a couple questions real quick. First of all, do you have a preferred brand of mono, and do you find that the color has any effect? And when you talk about releasing, you said use bolt cutters.
Yeah.
Have you had any luck with any of the commercial brand fish dehooker tools?
I'll start with that. The hooker tools, they work, but there's times when they don't work. There's just times when you get a fish that's huge, those tools only work if you can get that right angle. If you can't get that angle because the fish isn't cooperating, like I've done it. What are you gonna spend? You can't spend 10 minutes trying to get the hook up, because the fish is gonna die. That's why I just stopped using them offshore. I use them on the beach all the time. I rarely ever use bolt cutters on the beach. The only time I use a bolt cutter on the beach is if I catch a hammerhead, because he's got to get back in the water immediately or he'll die. Other than that, on the beach you have so much room to work with, you can always get the right angle. But on the boat, you get a really mad mako or bull that's thrashing. There's no way. I mean, you might get it, but there's a lot of times you might not get it. So, and if you're doing catch and release, it's safer to cut it. And going back to mono, we've used Bull Buster for a while now, and I've been very happy with it. I've never had it fail. It's good stuff. I mean, you want a mono that, in terms of, I like a stretchy, soft mono. You don't want something too hard. This is a huge secret I'm telling you guys right now. Me and Ben talk about this all the time. I'll tell you guys. So, when you have hard mono, has anyone ever ran into this problem? Have you ever tried tying 300-400 pound mono and had it break? You've had that happen? You know why? It kinks like wire. After a certain point, monofilament, because there's so much of it and it gets hard. When it tightens, it just snaps like you're breaking off a strand of wire, and that's the knot that does it. I learned this when I fished from Goliath. I had a 400-pound mono on my reel, right? And I tie a uni knot, and before an inch of line came off the reel, it snapped every single time. Like, why is this snapping? That's where you have to crimp. You always have to crimp. Anything above 200 or 150, I always crimp. Depending on, you could tie 200, but it depends on the brand. If it's a hard mono, like fluorocarbon, for example, I ran into this problem with amberjacks recently. What happens with fluorocarbon, if you use heavy fluorocarbon and you're using extreme drag, it splinters down the middle like this. It just fractures and opens up. It can't handle that much pressure. So that's where, if you're using a lot of drag, you want to use a softer leader material that can absorb more of that shock.
So I have never caught a shark before, right?
Yeah.
You were talking a little bit about, the fish safety and our safety, and I actually value that a lot. So my question for you would be, if, when I catch my shark and it's during the wait, and I want to release it as soon as possible, right? Could you give me a few more specifics on the releasing procedure? What would be the best way to actually neutralize the shark to take the hook out and put him back in the water?
Well, I mean, it's very hard for me to tell you that right here. I mean, we're in the process of making a video of how to actually do it because it's a lot easier if I have a shark in front of me. But you want to pull him up. The first thing, the sharks, depending on how green he is and how mad he is, if he's thrashing, at the end of the day, your safety is number one. I've been bit by sharks. I had friends bit by sharks. You do not want to be bit by a shark. My friend got bit in his ankle, and it took a 13-hour surgery to put his foot back together. And when you get bit by a shark, you have to go to a plastic surgeon. He has to reconnect everything. So you don't want that. So you want to avoid that at all costs. And at the end of the day, we're all about conservation here, but your life is way more important. If a shark dies, this is fishing, right? I mean, catch and release, there's no such thing as a 100% mortality rate. You're going to have fish will die. That's just life. So you always want to make sure that you put your safety first. And then as a fish, you want to make sure that the fish is controllable, right? If you're like a lot of times I will not solo shark fish, even for black tips, because it's very hard to control them, and a lot of bad things can happen. So it's always fish with a partner. When you have two people, you can always work as a team. One guy holds the shark, the other guy takes the hooking tool, takes the hook out. And that's the best way. You definitely don't want to leave them in the water. If you get a smaller shark, you want to pull him up where you can control him. The most important thing is you don't want him to swim away. If he can still swim when you're trying to take the hook out, that's when you're going to get bit. Because he can move. If a wave can come up and wash him right into your leg, if he's got his mouth open, man, you're going to have a bad day.
All right, thanks.
When you're taking the shark out of the water, do you recommend using a rope, putting around its tail?
I use a rope for bigger sharks. For little sharks, I just grab around the base of the tail. The rope thing, is it's a guarantee to get the shark. And for big sharks, it's impossible to do without a rope. But you just can't move something that big. But for little sharks, you don't need it. And what will actually happen with the little sharks, because they can turn so much, they'll tear your rope up. They'll bite your rope. Have you ever had that happen? And then you have like a shark that's in like a U, and he won't let go of the rope, so you're just dragging him up, and he looks like ridiculous. That happens. So if you want to go through a lot of ropes, I'd recommend using rope all the time. If you want to make sure you keep your rope nice, you only use it on the big fish.
Are they flexible enough to come back?
Yeah, they'll bite your ankle. Yeah. The small sharks are very dangerous.
I got a friend of mine who's very, very into shark fishing, just got bit by a 6-footer. He was trying to get the hook out, was having trouble, went back to get his bolt cutter, came back, grabbed the tail, it flipped around and latched onto his arm right here. He's got almost 300 stitches right now. Wow.
Yeah.
To be alive. So.
Yeah. You don't want to play games. You never ever take your eye off a shark ever. You always make sure you watch his mouth. Always. I've taken my eye off for 1 second and they got me. You can never underestimate them.
What rod length are you using on the beach?
So I use anywhere between, you can see this in our combos and TackleDirect, I use anywhere between 11 and 13 foot for surf casting. Now the more important thing is the rod length is the lure weight of the rod. All the rods we put in the combos on TackleDirect, those are all rods that can cast a 6-ounce pyramid sinker and a pretty decent sized piece of bait. If your rod isn't, like some of these rods, like say if it's rated for 3 to 6 ounce lures, you will eventually snap that rod. You need something that can throw I'd say a minimum of 8 ounces, maximum, and I prefer something that can throw 10. It just, and the length depends, I believe there's a reason why surf rods aren't 20 feet long. There's a point where the length of your rod doesn't matter anymore. The way you cast, how tall you are, will determine how well you use a rod. Like, you may be able to cast a 12-foot rod better than I can cast a 12-foot rod because you might be taller than me. You get a guy that's like, I'll just read an article. Has anyone here ever heard of the guy Big Kenny, striped bass guy? You've heard of him?
He turns points too, doesn't he?
Pardon me?
He turns points too, doesn't he?
Yeah, he just recently died, but he was 6'4", 440 pounds. This guy could throw a mile. He could probably whip a 14-foot rod. I found that I can cast a 11-foot rod almost as good as I can cast a 13-foot rod. So it's all how well the rod loads based on how you cast.
I have a Century, spinning machine.
Yeah.
So I did 4 days.
That's perfect.
And I'm having trouble loading it because it's a little too big for me.
You know, I use a 13-foot rod, and I'm 5'9", 150 pounds, and I'm a little guy. But I also use 11-foot rods and 12-foot rods. You know, the 13-foot rod, so here's where I use my 13-foot rod. If I need to get, sometimes you just can't reach the fish. You know, you need to have that extra 20 feet, you know, get a bite, and that's where having that 13-foot rod is going to make that difference. It takes practice. It takes practice. I mean, you know, but you know, maybe having a shorter rod, 11-foot or 12-foot or something that you can throw better for, because like, I'm not going to lie, I enjoy fighting a fish a lot more on an 11-foot rod than I do on a 13-foot rod, because the 13-foot rod just, the longer your rod, the more leverage you lose. So when you have a really long rod, it's gonna be hard to fight the fish.
It's a stiff problem.
It's real stiff?
Yeah,
What size weight are you throwing?
it's 4 days ready,
No, but when you throw a weight, what are you throwing?
like 4 ounce, 5, 6,
Yeah, I'd throw a 6, you know, and then how long is your leader?
about 5 feet, I would guess.
I mean, you know, again, this also depends on the cast. Casting is a little bit more technical, so it all depends also where the weight is. Like, I always like to have my weight stationary. Some people like sliding weights. I like a stationary weight, and I like my weight a maximum of 20 inches for my bait. I want the majority of the weight of the rig, you know, below in the lower third of the rig. When I throw that, like the farther the sinker gets away from the bait, it's going to start spinning, doing helicopter stuff, and you don't want that because you're going to lose a lot of distance. You want to make it just go. So it might be the way you're rigging your baits. Try just throwing a sinker. Just throw a sinker, get used to that. Try to figure out. Every rod loads differently. You got to learn how that rod works with you, you know. And once you figure out just with the sinker, you're going to learn how to throw with a rig.
Because I was actually thinking about selling it.
A Century, that's top of the line. I mean, that's a really good rod.
So do you just get like a, I don't know, like 6-foot steel leader and then just put the weight right on the leader?
We have a video on our YouTube channel that shows how to tie. I mean, that's the exact rig I use. I actually use like an 8-foot leader. I use about 18 inches of wire, and the rest of it's 500-pound mono. And you don't need a lot of wire if you're using circle hooks, because you know, I mean, I'm fishing for sharks 5 to 8 feet. You want enough wire that the wire has to be long enough so it can stretch across the width of their mouth. If it can't go across the width of their mouth, then they can bite it off the mono and you'll lose them. Because you never know, if they do that head shake stuff, that leader material might come back and you can grab it, and if you can bite it off, you will. Some people use all wire. The problem with using all wire or all cable is it kinks up and gets damaged a lot easier. You know, mono is a lot more forgiving and it's cheaper too. So if you, I used to use all cable rigs. My rigs used to be all ball bearing, owner super Moodoos. They were $17 a piece. And when I started fishing for blacktips, there's days when I lose 10 rigs back to back to back to back to back. Oh, there goes $70. That's you know, or it goes to $100, $150. You know, it gets really expensive really fast. So, you know, you want to use cheaper lead materials, and you want to make sure that, you know, I like the mono because it's a much better shock absorber than all wire. Someone, you have a question?
Can you fly fish for blacktips?
Yes.
Will you be making a video on that shortly? Or?
I tried this past year. I mean, like I said, I only caught 12 the whole year. I usually catch 100. So it's a very finesse shark, very finesse. You have to really trick them. There's a guy in Palm Beach that is world famous for doing it. His name's Scott Hamilton. If you want to catch one, I'd recommend contacting Scott Hamilton. That's all he does. Any other questions? John, you got any questions online?
Yeah, the comments are never ending here.
All right, so we'll answer some online.
There's a bunch of people that are asking, what size reel do you recommend for catching hammerheads?
That 130 right there. That's if you want to catch big sharks, anything over 12 foot, I would recommend the 80 wide. Hammerheads, you got to land as fast as possible. You got to use an insane amount of drag, especially from the beach, and you need to use you need to have a lot of line capacity because I mean we fought one for 2.5 hours. It was every bit of 14 feet, and it took us I'd say almost an hour and a half to get back from 1,000 yards. So it's, yeah, you need the line and you need the drag.
Yeah, people want to know what are the reels on the table. So we have a 130, an 80.
And a 50.
That's a 50, right?
Yeah.
Accurate?
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of people want to know what's a good inexpensive combo for sharks.
Oh, if you look on the BlacktipH one, we've actually that beef stick one we have, the Daiwa beef stick, and what's the reel? The Penn, the Fierce. That you can catch sharks on that all day long. My friend, he's used that Daiwa beef stick. He's had it since 2004, and he's caught 800 sharks on it, and it's not broken. So it's a, for $35 or $40, it's a pretty darn good rod.
Also, someone said they got bitten by a bull shark 7 years ago, and it took his left leg and 4 fingers from his left hand.
Yeah, that sucks. Was he spearfishing?
I don't know. He didn't say.
The trailer hook.
Yeah. My gosh, that would really suck. One thing I want to show you guys actually is our, if you guys want to catch sharks on lures, this is our beginner pack. You know, I'm actually gonna put this back on the rack here. Sharks on lures is the coolest, most amazing thing ever. And if you can do it, if you can sight fish sharks on lures, you will stop speaking English like I did. So these are the lures I use. These are in our Pro Pack. We got a subsurface, you know, in case, you know, whatever. A top water that you know, that's moving on top. You can use a pop or two. And then something that dives. Like, for example, like one night, and actually in one of our videos we had this. We were shark fishing at night with lures, and I was throwing this thing. I couldn't get a bite. This is an orca, yeah. You know, this is a really good lure. They love these things. But I couldn't get a bite. When I switched to the north bar here, it dives and it was rubbing the sand. Every cast, they just were not hitting top water. They were feeding on something that was, I think they were feeding on croakers or whiting, and that's all they wanted. So you gotta have the right lures to you know, to match what they're feeding on. So you know, this is a great range right here, and you can get a big pencil popper or a you know, a big cup popper or whatever, and those work really well too. Here, John, do you guys want to pass these around? Here.
You're throwing the lures off the beach.
Pardon me?
You're throwing the lures off the beach.
Yeah, it's the coolest thing ever. If you can do it, trust me, it's the funnest thing ever.
Around what time of the year can you catch them on lures, like whenever they're running?
In Florida, okay, so blacktips and lemon sharks are going to be your easiest fish to hit on lures. Lemon sharks you're going to find, you can probably get them year round in the Keys and in the Florida Everglades. Blacktips, you got to follow the migration. So right now they're probably up in Georgia or South Carolina right now. So those blacktips are the best ones to catch on top water because they explode out of the water, they go crazy. Lemon sharks will hit it too. I haven't had much experience with sandbars or stuff up here, your brown sharks and that, so they might hit it, you know, but you can't just, if you're planning to just throw a lure and hoping a shark's gonna hit it, not gonna happen. You gotta, one thing I use, if you guys have ever thought of this, I actually use my drone. I send my drone up and I go look for sharks. And then when I find them, I walk over and I start throwing the popper. That's one way you can find them. And then you can actually sight fish to them. You know, you got to throw it in front of them. If they don't see it, then they're not going to chase it.
What setup would you recommend for Back Bay kayaking?
For sharks or for bluefish or that?
For sharks.
7-foot rod, and you know, you don't need a big reel because when you're fishing for sharks from a kayak, I've done a fair amount of it. There's a point where drag doesn't matter anymore, and they just keep towing you around. So, you know, you could probably use a reel like this Saltigo or like you know, an 8,000 pen bow or some of that or conflict, and you know, fill it with 50-pound braid, and you'll be good to go.
Or like dusky brown?
Yeah, fine. You know, I mean, as long as the only problem when you kayak fish, if you get into deep water, like in Florida, and you hook a big shark, you're screwed. I mean, you're so screwed because you cannot get him off from the depths. Like I fought a 450-pound bull shark in 38 feet of water, and it took me over 20 minutes to get him up 10 feet. If you went down 100 feet, I'd have to cut the line. There'd be no way I'd ever get that fish up. You don't have the leverage on a kayak to lift big fish from deep water.
So when you're thinking of drag, you're thinking of everything. When does time come into a factor? Because you believe in catch and release, which is great. When do you say, like,
once
depending on the fish?
two and a half, 3 hours is the max. I'd cut the line after that. Yeah, after 2 hours, the same thing that happens with marlin and tuna. Tuna will actually cook themselves from the inside out with lactic acid. Marlin, they just sink deep and die. These fish just can't fight for hours and hours and hours. Sometimes tuna can. If there's a good current, if there's something that can push water through their gills and it keeps them going, yeah, they can stay alive. But if you're fighting them and they're just all over the place and they're not getting good water through their gills, they'll die in 2.5, 3 hours.
How do you find the glides? Like, your videos are insane.
You know what I did? And this is the biggest tip ever. Talk to scuba divers. Scuba divers know more about the ocean than anyone in this room. You know, they know everything. They know where everything is. Like, I'm still trying to find, down by me, there's this enormous school of migratory jack crevalles that average 40 to 50 pounds, and they hang out in the deep water. And I'm still trying to find them. I have never found them yet. The divers see them every day. So but divers, this is where I'm gonna pull a little Kevin Mitnick right here. You gotta use a little bit of social engineering. You gotta pretend you're a diver. You gotta go to them and say, hey, I'm looking to find, I just came down and I'm looking, I really want to dive with a Goliath grouper. Where should I go? And then they'll tell you, and then you go fishing.
Finding bait when you're down at a marina, just go right to a marina in the area where you're going to go find. Valente shark fishing. Like, say I wanted to go down to Florida. The best way to sometimes get bait, you mentioned, is sometimes.
Honestly, the best way to get, if you want to get fresh bait, go on a drift boat. Drift boats catch so much fish, and you can get so much bait from them. And they have carcasses you can use. They have everything. And they're cheap. They're $45, $50 for a half day. So, you know, if you buy bonitas in a store, you're going to pay $15, $20 a fish. You could go on a drift boat and get a lot more bait, you know, for a lot less money.
Time of day, is that a factor?
Yes, it is. Sharks don't like really hot weather, so I find they go into deeper water then. But at the same time, if there's bait, they're going to feed. You know, it could be 150 degrees. If there's bait, and they'll eat. You know, obviously that's extreme, but I find my best times to catch sharks and all fish is, you know, the first couple hours in the morning, and then like 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon till dark. You know, that time between 9 a.m. and like 3 o'clock is like dead time. I don't even fish anymore during that time. I just stopped fishing from the beach. I only fish when, like, tide doesn't even mean anything to me because it doesn't matter if high tide's at noon. Sharks, they don't feed.
And tide is a factor too then?
It is depending on the structure you're fishing. If you're fishing a beach that's pretty deep, it doesn't really mean anything. It also means if the tide moves the bait out, then they're going to follow the tide. It's all relative to where the food is. Yeah, it really is all about the bait.
Sabiki rigs or cast nets?
Depends on how deep the water is, and it depends on like if you're fishing if the bottom's all coral, you don't want to throw a cast net because you want to have a cast net. So you got to, you know, cast nets is much more efficient. But the other problem with cast nets is you kill bait with them. You take the slime off of them, and they get damaged. Where a sabiki rig, you can use a dehooking tool, drop them in the live well, and you never even touch them. So it depends on what your goals are. If you're looking to get a bunch of chummers to throw out there, cast net all day long. But also, you know, like I said, if there's rocks in that, probably not a good idea.
I was going up to fish the power plant outside Sarasota, and a buddy of mine said the blacktips or spinners were very leader shy.
They are.
I did not get a chance to fish there, but down south in Minnesota and Gasparilla Islands, I have not had that problem.
It depends on the area. It's
like would you snell circles then?
Yep, I snell them to like number 9, number 7 wire, real light. It's unbelievable. Like my experience this year, blacktips, to get them to hit on a lure is harder than to get a snook in the middle of the day to hit on a lure. That's how hard they are. And what I like, the more light there is, I've learned that you have to use the smaller the lure you have to use. You have to use something this big to get a bite. They won't hit big plugs. It's crazy. And you got to use light wire. Like I was throwing plugs this big, like the ones you guys passing around, and when within 20 feet of the shark, they take off in the opposite direction. They were scared of it. They knew it. They'd spook within 30 feet. So you got to lead her down. That's where a fly guy can have a huge advantage over a guy throwing a popper. You know, you want to use little X wraps, little whatever, something very small that looks like a simple meal. I actually don't use circle hooks on lures. I found this problem out when I was fishing for tarpon. What happens is when the fish hit it, they break the circle hook inward. If they clamp down on it, they snap the tip off. That's how it had to happen. So we got them on the website, right? The recommended hooks on the lure combos. Yeah, I use a stainless steel Mustad J hook, you know. And the thing is, they're not gonna. It's very hard to gut hook a lure because you already have your drag set, everything's set, and when he hits that lure, he's hooked. You set the hook right away. So most of the time you're gonna get him right somewhere in the mouth.
Someone I think you know, Leo Renner, is commenting saying how much he likes his Everall 18-aughts.
Oh, those are good reels too.
Instead of like Shimano Tiagras. And do you have any experience with the big Everalls?
I do, yeah. I mean, they're good reels. The only thing I don't like about them is first off, the service is extremely hard to get. You know, same thing with the duals and the other like Italian reels. They're hard to service. You know, you can't just walk into a tackle shop and drop your 130 off and go, hey, can you fix this in a week or 2 weeks? So that's a big problem. But they're well built. I noticed the Everall, like the 12-0s, they don't have a lot of drag. The 18 and 20s, those are monsters. I mean, they have huge amount of drag and huge amount of line capacity. So, but here's the other problem. I would never use a reel that big where I fish. But maybe if I need to kayak a bait 600 yards out to get a bite, that's where that reel like that might be better than a 130.
For the duels, do you like reel backwards to get low gear?
Yeah. So, all right, everyone watching this, this is the end of this backwards forwards nonsense. So, on a duel, it's a ratchet reel. Reeling forwards is high gear. Reeling backwards is low gear. We're not Googans because we reel backwards. It's how the reel works.
I see that in the comments all the time.
Oh, I can't stand it. And I love when people are arrogant and they think that they think they're the master of fishing. They tell you that you're so stupid. I'm like, dude, do you even know what that reel is? Yeah. But that's a really good reel. I've been using this reel since 2009. I never broke one. I never serviced one. We're trying to get back here to TackleDirect. The only problem with those reels, I don't even know, like, if I broke mine right now, I wouldn't even know what to do. Like, I don't think there's anywhere in the country I can send it to anymore.
Yeah, they're in Alabama, so they do service.
They do there?
You gotta mail it there.
No. So I'll send it to John. He'll take care of it for me. Any more comments from there? They're probably coming in at 10 per second or something, right?
Yeah, so talking about catfish for bait.
Catfish is,
BlacktipH.
yeah, it's an awesome bait. Catfish are amazing bait. Sail cats and gaff top. I don't know why, but they love them. And another thing, they're also good snook bait too. Snook eat them too. I mean, they're the worst. You do not want to get stabbed by one of those things. But I'll tell you what, when you throw a catfish out, I've had days where I throw jack and bluefish, no bites. I throw a catfish, I get a bite in 10 seconds.
What size of those catfish do you use?
Any size, as long as you can. I mean, obviously, if it's too small, it's too small. But like I said, you want to get a piece of bait as big as a closed fist or the size of a credit card. If you can, chunking it. No, don't leave it whole. No, you want to chunk it. They have really good. They're really bloody, so sharks love them.
Can you flip those underneath like bridge pilings too? Would that work?
If you're flipping, I wouldn't use catfish. I would use like a ladyfish, or you're talking about snook, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd use a ladyfish, a croaker, a pigfish. I would use something that might swim a little better in the current. Catfish is, that's something like, for example, if you're targeting big snook are lazy. They're like big stripers. They just want to sit there and let the current put food in their mouth. So we catch a lot of big snook on just cut bait, like a cut mullet head or a cut, that's all they'll eat. Live bait, a lot of times a little snook will eat it before a big snook will. So I would use in that situation, if there's a lot of current, I would use like a live mullet or something like that. They'd smoke that.
Someone named Breaking Rods asked, do you eat your fish sometimes?
I do eat my fish sometimes. We ate some fish last night, actually, bluefish. And how did that taste, John?
The bluefish was delicious, actually. I can't lie.
Yeah, I was shocked.
Very surprised.
And we never bled him or nothing. We just left him there, and it was like, wow.
Where'd you catch that bluefish last night on your Instagram?
Ooh. Yeah, you're gonna have to pay John to tell that one. I don't know.
Jersey.
Yes, somewhere in the state of New Jersey. No. They're all in the shallows right now, actually, from what I heard.
you still relying on large rocks and monofilament for your weight?
Yes, but I've actually been, I have a new system. One thing that sucks when you use a rock and you tie it to your rig is if the shark grabs your bait, he'll bite it off. So I like to use like a little claw sinker on my weight as well. So if he does bite the rock off, at least it can still hold better than if the bait's just sitting around rolling around. So you can attach a small sinker. The reason I don't like the big claw sinkers you see the guys that in Texas use is if you hook a small shark, you won't even know he's there and he'll just sit there and die. You're reeling dead sharks all the time. So you want to use something that is strong enough to hold the current, but isn't too strong where a 5-foot shark, you wouldn't even notice it's on the rod.
What are you talking about, like the Sputniks?
Yeah, or those homemade giant claw sinker things, whatever those things are called.
Jared Dickerson asks, how can we help fight negative press for land-based shark fishing?
Be a responsible angler. Don't fish in guarded beaches, and just be respectful to other beachgoers. And you know what? Right now, because shark fishing is under attack, and it really is, fish at night. Don't fish in daylight. When I started doing this, we used to fillet blacktips on the beach and eat them. If I did that today, I'd be on CNN, I'd be on everywhere, and they'd be called the shark butcher of Florida. But smartphones have changed everything. So everyone is a reporter now. So you can't, if you caught a big shark broad day and there's 1,000 people around you, you're going to be in the news. You're going to get negative press. So fish at night, fish in spots where there aren't a lot of people, and be respectful of other people, and there shouldn't be any problems.
I have Jeffrey Rodriguez says, what is your recommendation? Do you set your drag at full spool or half spool, since drag pressure doubles at half spool when he's yakking?
You want to set your drag according to the line that you have on your reel. So I only fish 200-pound mono and 200-pound braid, so I've never had that break. And if you're fishing 200 pounds of drag, man, you're a hero, because I don't know anyone that can hold that. You got to be 500 pounds to hold that. So just do it based on your full spool is, realistically, you want it full spool, you want to set it there. Half spool, when you get down there, a lot of things start happening when you have heavy drag and you have a lot of heat. Your drag discs are not smooth anymore, they skip. You also have problems with steam. If you have bad grease in your reel and your reel heats up too much, it can heat the grease up enough where it starts steaming and it can slip your drag plates or drag discs. So a lot of things can go wrong when you have that much pressure at that low of a spool.
Do you have any plans to go fishing in Mexico?
Yes, I've been invited twice this year. I haven't been able to make it yet. I was actually supposed to go to a marlin tournament today or something. Someone invited me to go to Cabo, but I just, I'm here, so not happening.
Have you caught any mako or thresher sharks?
I hooked 2 makos from the beach. I lost them both, and I have not caught a thresher. I want to catch one of those big eye threshers they catch sword fishing. That's like a dream fish of mine. I heard that's the strongest fish ever. Your average fight time on one of those is 3 hours. I can't imagine.
Are you able to target specific sharks? Like what he's talking about, like around here, threshers and makos are like eating fish,
In Florida, there are makos and threshers out where the swordfish are in the deep water, but inshore, they come in very rarely. You're going to see a lot of inshore species, bulls, hammers, tigers, lemons, blacktips, silkies, stuff like that. Out here, I've had mako. Mako's delicious, but another thing is in Florida, I don't know if they did up here. There's a lot of no-kill shark marinas where you can't bring sharks back anymore. So, if I caught a small mako and it died, I would. Oh yeah, definitely. I'd put it on the grill that night. But if I had the chance to release it, especially because I film everything, I'd probably release it. But if you're eating them, yeah, out here you can target them. In Florida, there's not a lot of sharks. Actually, just very few sharks you can eat. Like blacktips, I used to eat them, and then what happened was, the meat was inconsistent. Sometimes it was really good, sometimes it was really bad. So I was like, there's no point in killing these things because it's a toss-up if it's going to be good or bad. So does that answer your question?
Sure. I was just saying because like threshers I like to eat.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of them just throw them back.
You don't like eating makos?
I cook for a living, so I'm kind of picky when it comes to that. So I just
learn, so if you want to target one shark in particular, learn everything about it. So learn, like a thresher shark has a long tail, he's got that for a reason. Learn how he feeds, learn what he feeds on, learn, like the shape of their teeth will tell you everything about how they feed and stuff like that.
I only caught him on stretch lures, it's so weird. I mean,
You,
these
you,
tails,
yeah, you'll find them. I mean,
it's
just,
weird.
you just got to learn, like, that's where you want to start asking biologists, start calling your state fisheries, ask them about, you know, what is thresher sharks like, what do they do? You know, they'll answer you because you're buying a fishing license, you're paying, you deserve that right to ask them those questions, and they'll tell you. You just learn as much as you can. Like blacktips I've learned a lot about, you know, like, and bull sharks I've learned, the hammerheads I've learned, but, you know, you can make good predictions, but it's not an exact science. These fish are in a huge ocean and they can move wherever they want. So, but I said, if you find the food that they like feeding on, it's a good chance you're going to find thresher sharks.
Sharks, I know they fin a lot. What's that, are they eating or are they just warming up from death or what?
I don't, you know, no one really knows. I've seen blacktips. Blacktips are, we actually have some footage of it. They actually surf, like a surfer. They get on top of waves and they surf right on top of them and they do jumps and spins on the waves. Sharks are pretty intelligent. I think sometimes they just want to hang out. They just want to play. You know, I mean, if they're finning, maybe they're coming up to maybe something with water pressure or I don't know. I mean,
I've seen threshers, like you said, off Island Beach, just, there was food around, but they were just sitting like literally just in one spot.
yeah.
Like, I was like 5 feet away.
They could just be hanging out. They could just be, you know, like, I mean, especially if, I don't know, maybe the sharks were spawning. I don't know. If they're spawning, they might not eat at all. You know, I mean, every shark's different, right? Every fish is different. They behave differently based on their environment. So you need to learn, that's where you need to take the time to really learn the behavior of the fish to understand why they're doing things. Like, I finally learned why, like this year, we figured out why the blacktips jump and spin. You know, for years, scientists have been asked about that. I got a video, I haven't sent it to them yet, but I've actually figured it out. It's nothing, people thought it was about parasites, they thought it was about food. It's nothing to do with that. It's actually like a dance. We were filming the drone, and you can see the sharks. They all come up in sequence, and then one of them will spin and jump in the water. That's why it's always random, because it's always a different spot. So it's a mating behavior, and I think it's a form of communication. You know, so it's interesting, and no other shark does that. You know, so the thresher sharks, what they're doing, I've never seen that, so I really can't tell you what they're doing. But if you look at it, if you observe it long enough, you'll find out why they're doing it. You know, because no matter whatever behavior a fish is doing, eventually they have to eat. So when you start finding out what they do in between eating times, then you'll start learning their behavior better.
Just wanted to add on, you said be respectful to fishermen. You know, one of the biggest things I've seen people have a problem with is the mess that a lot of fishermen leave behind, like fishing line and trash and garbage. If you police the area after you're done and leave the beach with more than you came from, you'll be welcomed back a lot more.
Yeah. And you know what? I mean, every state, you know, what you guys can do if you're all land-based shark fishermen is maybe organize beach state cleanups or a beach cleanup. You know, just this is the society we live in. Everyone, you know, they jump on bandwagons. You know, I mean, you know, one day they love you, the next day they hate you. You know, like you pick up a piece of garbage, and now you're the hero of the day. So I don't know what to tell you. Just like I said, he said, be as respectful as possible and just do things. Unfortunately, sometimes we have to be people pleasers. You know, we have to make the general public happy. So, same thing with these. Look what's happening with these kill tournaments. You know, I mean, there are fewer and fewer kill tournaments now than there was in the past, and it's just because people don't want to see all these big fish dead anymore. You know, so times are changing. They definitely are. We have to adapt as fishermen and learn how to work within the new mindsets of people. Start on the beach.
Right on the beach.
Yeah, I actually don't shark fish at all, pretty much from a pier. You know, it's too challenging. You know, like, and there's always a lot of swimmers around piers and that, so it's hard to land big sharks there. And the other problem with piers is, you know, every pier has a different shape, so like sometimes it's really hard to get around, like the pier domes or roofs or whatever. And if you're fighting a big shark, you know, you physically can't pass the rod around to work you can't land him from the pier, right? I mean, if you're bringing a shark up on the pier, you're killing it. So if you don't have a way to get to the beach, it's very hard to catch them. How many comments are coming in? Is it insane?
Good amount.
Any more questions?
I know one counterclaim against land-based shark fishing is that we're attracting sharks to the beach.
That's not true at all.
Yeah, it's
No
what
way.
I asked.
You know what? Look at the blacktip shark migration. I use that as an example every time. Thousands, 15,000 sharks come to the beach, and there's not a single angler in sight.
I was telling her that last night because I was showing her the video
Yeah.
of the drone and all the sharks. It was crazy.
Yeah, they don't. Sharks. The beach is a structure that not just sharks, all predatory fish use to ambush prey and hunt. It's a hunting ground. It's no different than going in the woods. And most of those people are just very ignorant, stupid people that they don't understand how nature works. You know, same thing, like they live in a suburban area and they see a squirrel, they go crazy, you know, but when you go out into the woods, there's bears, there's all kinds of stuff out there that's dangerous, you know, so, you know, the ocean is just like a forest, you know, you don't know what's out there, you don't know what you can encounter, and they come and go as they please, you know, that's how I would say it, just like, dude, you know, if I set up a camp, am I attracting bears? Does that mean that we should ban all camping? You know, it's just, I mean, will it attract a shark that's in the area? Maybe. But is it going to attract a shark from 10 miles offshore? No way. Not happening.
The way I see it too with that is that, I mean, how much bait is an angler going to put out there? Like, you know, one angler put one piece of bait, even if there's like 20 anglers put 20 pieces of bait, that's so minuscule.
It all washes back to shore too.
Yeah, it's so minuscule compared to like, it's not going to bring in, you know, entire schools of fish.
No way.
When it normally feeds them.
I wish it did though, because then I'd be catching a lot more fish, you know?
Never works for me.
That'd be awesome. I mean, can you imagine if you could just throw a couple bunker in the water and you'd have striped bass everywhere?
Yeah.
I mean, that'd be great.
That's just basic common sense to me, like,
I know.
you know, media and things like that.
Common sense isn't very common though, that's the problem. The general public's pretty dumb. You know, if you're not a fisherman, then you know, I've gotten so many negative comments towards me over the years. I used to reply to them. I don't anymore. I just let it ride its course. And here's what I've come up to the conclusion. These people, most of them, live in a city. They don't interact with nature on a daily basis. These are the same people that are anti-gun. Those are all the same people because they all live in a bubble, and they always interact with people. They don't ever interact with nature, and when they feel like they have to. Because they don't see nature that often, they feel overprotective of it. They have to always make sure that, oh my gosh, we gotta save this, we gotta save that, we gotta save that, because they don't ever get to experience it every day. But when you experience it every day, you know, first off, you learn to appreciate it a lot more, and you understand how it works. They don't understand how it works.
I think a lot of anglers too are typically more respectful and understanding of nature than a typical person.
Yeah, I mean, well, you know, there's a big problem up here. You guys have a seal problem, right? I mean, they need to kill a lot of those seals. They do. I'll tell everyone straight up because it's out of control. But there's a Marine Mammal Protection Act that prohibits that. So eventually, down the road, something has to happen because those seals there's way too many of them, you know, and there's no balance there. So exceptions have to be made, and that's where responsible leaders have to come with good facts. Fishermen, unfortunately, guys, we have to become the scientists now. The scientists, you know, it's like we live in a society now where everyone's competing for attention. You know, like I've had problems with some of the scientists down in Florida, you know, that works on these universities. They're like anti-fishing. They hate all fishing, and you can't change their way of thinking because they have a PhD and they're the god of everything. So, you know, you have to become well enough educate yourself to understand how things are working, and then you take that opportunity to educate people that you interact with. So when someone comes to you on the beach and they ask what you're doing, that's a great opportunity for you to educate someone. You never know who you're talking to. You know, you might talk to someone that can make a difference. So just become very, very well informed so you can defend yourself, and just become very familiar with the laws. Like I can't tell you how many times I've read the Florida Constitution and gone back and looked up records of the Supreme Court against fishing and everything. I've read it all, and I keep archiving in it because when it comes up, I bring these things up. You know, you have the right to fish and hunt. That has been the right of this country, of this land, since people came here 500-600 years ago. That's what this country was built on: fur trading and fish. This country is built on that. That's your right to do that, and you have to defend that.
You want to wrap it up, or?
Yeah, I mean, is there a few more comments there? Yeah, we'll answer a few more. I'll keep talking up here until I have to drink some water. It doesn't matter.
Someone said grouper carcass is amazing bull shark bait.
It is, it can be, you know, but it depends on where you are. If you're in the Bahamas, it's going to work awesome. If you're somewhere where there's no grouper, if you bring grouper carcasses up to here, you're not probably going to catch much on them.
Someone also said they got a 14-foot shark before on a pier.
I've seen it. I've seen videos. I mean, it happens.
Well, he said bull shark. I don't think
There's no such thing as a 14-foot bull shark. No such thing. There are 12-foot Pacific bull sharks in Fiji, and the Zambezi bull sharks in South Africa and or in southern part of Africa, they do get bigger than our bull sharks, but not 14 feet, no way. The Zambezis will get over 1,000 pounds, and the Pacific ones, they average, like, a 600-pound bull shark in Florida is enormous. That's the average size of one in Fiji.
Is it illegal to prevent someone from lawful fishing in Florida?
If someone, this probably happens, it's probably in all states. If someone prevents you from taking game, fish, or hunting, that is an arrestable offense, and it's a second-degree misdemeanor. They go to jail for that. They cannot. No one can prevent you from taking game. It's illegal. Check. I don't know if it's illegal in New Jersey.
It's illegal here.
Then yeah, it's legal. They have no right. One time, this is a true story. We caught a stingray, and we were going to keep it for shark bait. And this guy came after me with a baseball bat, and he was threatening to hit me in the head. And at the same time, the FWC showed up, and he had his gun ready to draw, and it was real serious.
I think the only way it's legal is private land, and it's posted, no fishing on anything like that.
And do what?
I think the only way it's legal is if it's posted private property.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, if it's. I mean, you can't fish on private property, or places where they have like a marina that says no fishing. Like, you know, some of these marinas, they make money. Like, have you guys ever heard of Robbie's in the Keys, where they feed tarpon? You think they're going to let you go in there and drop a thing down and catch one of those tarpon? No way. You know, do you know how much money they make? They make over $1 million a year selling tarpon food. You know, they're not going to. That's a big business revenue generating, you know, thing. So, I don't know if the marinas up here have fish food that they feed fish that you know, in their carcasses, but you know, obviously there's private property and stuff like that. You can't do it. You know, so the beaches are. In Florida, for example, the mean high tide mark for the last 19 years is the high water mark for state, and that's declared state property. I don't know what it is here, but you need to learn where state property begins and where municipalities end. And if you're legally allowed to traverse, go up and down the beach. So you need to learn. Every state's different. You know, you need to learn all those things for everywhere you go, because unfortunately, fishing is, like, it's not just Florida, it's everywhere. Like in Alabama, all shark fishing is banned statewide. In California, there's laws that says you can't dig a hole deeper than 6 inches. You know, so you technically couldn't put a sand spike in. You know, like there's rules everywhere, weird rules. You got to learn before you go fishing, because, you know, they don't care about it. You know, I mean, obviously, if I came up here and I was surf fishing, I would come with the same mindset. Oh, it's just like I'm fishing in Florida. You know, but there might be a law here that says I can't do what I do in Florida. So you got to really become familiar with the laws. It sucks, but that's just the society we live in now.
I have one more we can end on. It's from Joseph Dowsey. He wants to know what's the biggest fish you've ever caught.
13 feet 4 inches tiger shark in the Bahamas, and it was between like 800 and 1,000 pounds.
What reel did you use?
A Kyra 80 wide, and I had it was straight 200-pound mono. I fished I fought that fish for about, I'd say close to an hour.
That was another question. Someone asked, what's the longest you've ever fought a fish?
Almost 3 hours.
3 hours?
Yeah. Yeah, trust me, there's a point where that I've observed with myself where you don't feel tired anymore. You're just like numb. You just don't care anymore. You just keep going. That's what happens. I don't know. Everyone's different.
Was that tiger off the beach or a boat?
No, it's from a boat. Yeah. It's extremely hard to land-based fish in the Bahamas because it's all coral. There's very few beaches there. The beaches, That's what I mean, there definitely are places to go there, and the fishing is insane there. But usually in the Caribbean, you're going to find a lot of coral. And if you have like a deep drop off, like that drops off to 5,000-6,000 feet, and it's all coral, and you hook a big fish, he's going to just dive, cut you off instantly. You're not going to land him. What are we doing? You got any more? You guys have any more questions before we wrap this up? No? John, any more questions?
Do you prefer cutting the hooks or taking them out from land?
I prefer from land taking them out if possible. If it's a hammerhead, I always cut it. You know, because a hammerhead, they die very easily, so you gotta get them back in the water as fast as possible. Like with a hammerhead, honestly, I don't think I would take a picture. I just let it go right away because it's better for that thing to live than you have seconds. Especially if it's like a 12+ footer, they're gonna fight. A man is physically not strong enough to stop those things. They fight to the death. They're so strong. So there's nothing you can do to prevent them from dying. You just got to get them back in the water as fast as possible. In Florida, the FWC passed a law that said it's illegal to harvest hammerheads. And actually, this is a great thing I want to bring up here. There's a big difference between harvesting and catching. And this is the same, I think, in the whole country. When you're on a boat, when you remove a fish from the water, like say something's out of season, like a flounder, right now, whatever. You're allowed to remove from the water to photograph for evidence. They give fishermen that right. Harvesting means you're physically taking the fish back to the dock. Now a protected species like a Goliath grouper or longfin thresher, mako, you can't remove those from the water. A protected species that's federally protected or state protected cannot be removed from the water in those waters. So, you can catch them still. You can still target them. Like you're allowed to, if you hook a great white shark, which is a federally protected species, you're allowed to catch it. You just can't remove it from the water and harvest it. That's what the law means. So a lot of people get confused about that. But, it's really important you guys know that because, like on the beach, for example, I bring this up to the FWC all the time. Like, look, there is no safe way to land, to go in the water, remove the hook from a protected species without endangering your own life. So they've made all the laws basically for boats, but the beaches are a gray area and they're left for the discretion of the officer. So if you pull a fish out, there's a law that says if everything is a continual process, like and the continual process ends with the release of that fish, it's perfectly legal. But if you land the fish and then take a walk and come back 5 minutes later, yeah, you're going to get a ticket, But as long as you're releasing the fish, as fast as possible, there's nothing wrong with that. Even if it's a protected species like a Goliath grouper or a lemon shark or dusky or whatever in Florida. I'm pretty sure it's the same here. I don't know.
Lone Sharker wants to know, why did you make the Blacktip Challenge only spinning reels now?
Well, that was the last Blacktip Challenge. There is no more Blacktip Challenge. But the reason I made it all spinning reels is because it's more challenging. And also, I didn't want people catching hammerheads because we had a lot of problems with hammerheads being caught the year before. Good? You guys good? Any more?
Thank you.
All right, John, you want to wrap it up? Yeah. All right, guys, thanks for watching online, and thanks you guys for coming. Really appreciate it.